And also within the same video, Ben Shapiro goes on to accuse Cardi B of anti-Semitism even though she was literally praising Jews.
Meanwhile, Cardi B just gets away with sort of the most outrageous Jewish stereotyping available. So Cardi B, and again, as a person who is not a connoisseur of her entire oeuvre, Cardi B, who is a deeply unintelligent human being, she tweeted out the other day a picture of two Hasidic Jews. And these Jews are in like the full Hasidic garb, probably in Brooklyn. One is wearing a shtreimel, which is the kind of furry round hat that you see sometimes. The other is wearing a black hat and is also wearing a bekisha, which is kind of a long black jacket. The etymology of these things, they go back to Poland. And a very stereotypical picture of like ultra-Orthodox Jews. And she says, remember, ... What exactly is she referring to? Apparently, she's referring to a line in her Shakespearean song, Bickenhead, in which she says this. Okay, so lawyer is a Jew is the line, right? Lawyer is a Jew, he gonna get my money, right? Again, the idea being that because, so there is a typical Jewish stereotype that Jews are disproportionately lawyers. That's not a stereotype, that's true. Jews are disproportionately lawyers, doctors, accountants. There are a lot of different industries in which Jews represent a disproportionate share of members of the industry. What is actually stereotypical and anti-Semitic is the implication that if you take a picture of two very Hasidic Jews, that this is somehow representative of like her Jewish lawyers. Now, we actually have pictures of her Jewish lawyers. Okay, her Jewish lawyers look like secular Reform Jews at the very, very best. Do these look like the Jews that you just saw on the streets of New York? And the idea that all Jews are the same is a hell of a stereotype. If I was like, wow, rappers, and then I just posted a picture of Barack Obama and Eric Holder, you'd be like, that's a little racist, isn't it? That seems like a little racist. Cardi B, however, says this kind of stuff on the routine and no problem whatsoever. And this is true throughout, unfortunately, rap culture. This stuff is posted routinely by people ranging from like Ice Cube to Cardi B. And everybody just goes, whatever. Is that really a big deal? Well, I mean, it would be if we were talking about any other race attacking members of any other race.
Isn't this the kind of sensitivity and snowflakism that Ben Shapiro has clearly dedicated his platform to fighting against? Also, has the definition of anti-Semitism changed? Because according to Shapiro, apparently even positivity about Jews can be misconstrued as anti-Semitism. Now, this video will be incomplete if we did not touch on Ben Shapiro's problematic remarks surrounding Asians. It is not only not racist to call coronavirus the Chinese virus, a term directly targeting the Chinese government, not Chinese people. It is both accurate and necessary as the Chinese government distributes propaganda blaming everyone but their own shitty government for this. So yeah, Ben Shapiro makes it quite clear that criticism of the Chinese government, even when his watchers could literally be misinterpreted as an attack on the Chinese themselves. He claims his criticism shouldn't be taken as an attack on the Chinese themselves. And you know what? Once again, let's say I agree with him even though he made the tweet in the wake of a spike in anti-Asian hate crimes in America. So let's give it to him and go ahead to see how Ben Shapiro reacts when anyone dares criticize the Israeli government. And remember that in this next video, Ilhan Omar was responding to a comment by Bibi Netanyahu where he said that Israel is the national state not of all its citizens but only of the Jewish people.
Denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, for example, by claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor. Okay, that is definitional anti-Semitism according to the State Department. Here's Ilhan Omar doing exactly that in the last month.
When I see Israel institute law that recognizes it as a Jewish state and does not recognize the other religions that are living in it, and we still uphold it as a democracy in the Middle East, I almost chuckle because I know that if we see that in any other society, we would criticize it, we would call it out. We do that to Iran, we do that to any other place that sort of upholds its religion.
Okay, she's just lying now. She's lying openly. Muslims have more rights in Israel than they do in any Muslim state anywhere in the Middle East. Islam is a religion that is protected by Israeli law. Mosques are protected by Israeli law. The Islamic Waqf controls the holiest site in Judaism, the Temple Mount itself. she's just full of it.
This dude gives us the definition of anti-Semitism and then still gives us an example that doesn't even remotely match that definition. And I have two things to say about that. First, no one cares or is against Jews having a set of their own, especially after their mistreatment in Europe. But that doesn't mean Zionists get to go around kicking everyone out of their homes and oppressing them for decades because you're a resistant anti-Semite if you disagree with the way we are going about establishing our own state. Second, Ilanoma's criticism was valid. When the Prime Minister of a nation with multiple ethnicities makes such a charged reference at the same time his administration is killing minorities left, right and center, only a fool like Ben Shapiro will characterize any criticism of his statements as anti-Semitism. And simply because Islam is protected under Israeli law doesn't mean that Arabs in the country aren't prosecuted. Lucky for you guys, I also saved the best double standard for last.
We have so much footage pouring in of protesters at various universities demonstrating their moral evil. It is impossible to go through all of it, but we'll start with Columbia. Here's some protesters at Columbia. And shouting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." That slogan, of course, is a genocidal slogan meant to destroy literally every Jew in the region. And as we've seen from Hamas, we know exactly what that means. That means the full-scale slaughter of Jews. And those are Americans, presumably, who are shouting that in the middle of the Columbia University campus. Now remember, these are campuses that are deeply worried about microaggressions. But if you shout, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," that, like, directly the same week that 1,300 Jews were murdered in their beds, well, then that's just, complex moral nuance, because multiculturalism, gang, it's just a different culture. It's just a different type of thinking. And we
So shouting "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free" is a genocidal slogan calling for the destruction of all Jews, especially when the slogan is used in the wake of Hamas's attacks that left 1,200 innocent Israelis dead, right? So tell me why, when you tweeted that there should be no Palestinian state aside from Jordan ever, and people call you out for your genocidal language, you claim they were reaching and misinterpreting what you really meant. And that's regardless of the fact you've been treating such nonsense in the wake of conflicts that always leave thousands of Palestinians dead. And I personally don't think Shapiro should be trusted, given he's also the same person that wrote an article titled "Enemy Civilian Casualties Okay by Me." Yeah, but you need the racist, no genocidal. And for those who claim that it's an old article and perhaps Ben Shapiro has changed since then, get out of here, man. First, I don't remember ever being genocidal in my life at any age, and I don't know anyone who ever was. Second, if you think it's changed, then why don't you point to any content where he has called for restraint from the Israeli government in an effort to preserve the lives of Palestinian children and women? And it can be even before the recent attacks by Hamas. Please, go ahead. Because in fact, if anything, since the attacks on October 7th on innocent Israelis, you've seen Shapiro both on Twitter and YouTube spewing nonsense and genocidal propaganda relentlessly. The main one being that anyone who dares stand with innocent Jews as well as the Palestinians' fight for freedom is not only morally bankrupt, but also an anti-Semite.
Because we are going already, you can feel it happening. We are already going back to our Western priors, which is everyone's reasonable, everyone can have a conversation, all cultures are basically equivalent, everyone wants to be free, and it's not true. It's not true. The people who are shouting "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," those people are not friends of the West. Those are enemies of the West. Those are people who hate the West just as much as they hate Israel. Those are people who are fully willing to give their full backing to a murderous, genocidal, anti-Jewish group. And then we all kind of like brush it off because we don't want to see. We don't want to see. The blinders are right back on. You can.
Through the 65-minute video, he nonchalantly brings up the issue of cultural differences and how these protesters' cultures is not only inferior, but also in direct opposition to Israel's and America's values. This is the same argument he uses to justify any oppressive and violent policies that Israel has instituted in Gaza and the West Bank. And it's ironic, for someone who can't bring up the Holocaust whenever people criticize the settler colony of Israel, it's ironic that he's always justifying genocide using the exact same rhetoric spewed in Europe that culminated in the Holocaust. For those who don't know, the Nazi Party quite literally gained popularity in huge part by presenting Jews as the source of the social, economic, and ethical clashes plaguing the German people, and the Jewish culture as a cancer that will destroy the country. Finally, to close the video, here is a video of Ben Shapiro where he's complaining about a $100 billion bill package that Joe Biden passed. He complains that $60 billion of that amount will go to Ukraine, while America has already spent a lot on the country. Him, alongside other conservatives, have been very vocal that America should use its money to focus on its own issues and not other countries. However, within the same video, he also complains because a portion of the cash should go to humanitarian efforts in Gaza, but then complains that the money America set aside for Israel isn't quite quite enough. Yeah, I don't get him either. He basically tries to justify how the situation in Israel is more urgent than the situation in Ukraine, even though Israel is on the offensive and Ukraine is on the defensive.
Okay, meanwhile, Joe Biden has put forward a bill. This bill is a $100 billion bill. Now, you might ask yourself, how much of that is actually going to support material aid for Israel, since that's what we're really talking about here. It's an emergency aid package for Israel. The answer is, of that $100 billion, $14 billion. 14. Now, listen, it may be that because the Republicans couldn't hit the side of the barn if they were trying to pee on it, that they have to vote for this thing. It may be that because Republicans don't even have a speaker, that the best available option, because of the urgency of the situation, and because Israel needs the aid like right the hell now, they need to be rearmed to destroy Hamas, they need to be rearmed to deter Hezbollah and prevent the region from spinning into a broader war, that there may not be a choice but to push for it, which again just exposes Republican incompetence in not having a Speaker of the House. Because if they had a Speaker of the House, you know what they could do? They could separate these into individual bills and force Democrats to vote no on Israel aid in order to get them to push an omnibus package, which would expose the real agenda here, which is the omnibus package. In any case, what Joe Biden is actually proposing is a $105 billion urgent funding request for the next year. It includes $60 billion for Ukraine. Now, remember, we've already spent $75 billion on Ukraine, minimum. So $60 billion on Ukraine. A lot of that is for replenishing U.S. weapons stockpiles that have already been provided. $14 billion for Israel in the face of existential threat. $10 billion for humanitarian efforts. So you might ask yourself, what's that $10 billion for humanitarian efforts? I've been assured by members of Congress, that's for Gaza. So if you're worried about $100 million being given to Hamas right now in the middle of a terror war where they hold American citizens hostage, get ready for $10 billion to be given to completely unreliable sources in the Gaza Strip. Now, what we can hope is that at least some of the senators, Republicans and Democrats in the Senate, will actually prevent that aid from being deployed absent certain conditions in the bill. We can hope and pray, because the idiotic idea of giving Israel $14 billion in military aid to destroy Hamas and then giving the people on the other side $10 billion to rebuild all of the terrorist infrastructure that Israel just destroyed is totally insane, totally crazy. Giving billions of dollars to the Palestinian Authority is totally nuts. However, the situation in Ukraine is not anything remotely like the urgency of the situation with Israel. And so the fact that Biden is trying to wrap these two together in order to get his Ukraine aid is pretty gross, considering that, again, Americans are pretty split on the future of Ukraine aid absent a plan to exit that particular conflict. And Americans are not split at all on aid to Israel. So Biden is trying to use goodwill for Israel to cram through $60 billion in aid to Ukraine.